What's a fun history fact that not many people know? 252 million years ago, it rained for 2 million years straight. Buzz Aldrin, the second person to set foot on the Moon, claimed $33.31 in travel expenses. Houston Cape Kennedy, the Moon, Pacific Ocean, Hawaii, Houston. The first fleet to Australia, landing on January 26, consisted of ships divided into male and female convicts. After having been at sea for several months and disembarking onto the beach, there was a good deal of sexual tension, such that it was feared a riot would erupt. In order to prevent this, the commander gave orders to allow the male and female prisoners to mix as documented in the ship logs. Thus, the first official act on Australian soil and celebrated annually on Australia Day, was a huge orgy. Not sure if this qualifies as a fun fact, but anyway, here goes. Edgar Allan Poe wrote a novel in 1838 in which 4 shipwreck survivors, at the point of starvation, choose to resort to cannibalism. So they kill the young cabin boy, Richard Parker, and eat him. In 1884, a ship called the Mignonette sank. 4 crew members survived. At the point of starvation, they killed and ate the youngest of them, Richard Parker. Marie Antoinette's last words were, "I'm sorry." She accidentally stepped on the foot of the executioner before she was beheaded. The Colosseum in ancient Rome had an extendable shade awning with piped-in water to mist attendees on hot days. About 94% of the people presently on the planet were born during the time Queen Elizabeth has been on the throne, 68 years. You can fiddle around with this chart to see what portion of the global population is under X age. The data is a few years old, hence the about bit. Xerxes had the sea whipped when a storm destroyed the construction of a bridge. Portland, Oregon was almost named Boston. It came down to a coin flip. Alexander Graham Bell shared this earth with Betty White for approximately 8 months. During the hunt for the German battleship Bismarck, a Polish destroyer that was part of the British destroyer flotilla sent to harass her, ORP Piorin, allegedly flashed the message, "I am a Pole." Other sources have stated the message was 3 salvos in honor of Poland, before opening fire on the battleship. It seems the ship's crew were eager for some payback for the invasion of Poland, as Piorin would exchange fire with the much larger ship for over an hour, all by herself, and only begrudgingly agreed to back off when she started running dangerously low on fuel. Earthquake storms, yes, fucking earthquake storms, were likely a major factor in the Bronze Age collapse. You know, when humans had just started getting their shit together, writing meaningful literature outside of accounting, built massive cities, and had global trade networks moving goods from India, to the Near East, to Egypt, to Crete and Mycenae, Greece, with robust seaworthy ships. In the 2nd millennium BC we'd made it that far. Then some goddamn droughts and earthquake storms. And a protracted dark age for everyone. Literacy rates and record-keeping are afterthoughts. Clothes in the medieval period were colorful as hell. In fact, if one thing is consistent about human behavior throughout history, it's that we love colorful things. Houses and castles were also colorful. We often see gray castles in TV shows because that's what we expect, but that's not how it was. Castles and statues and houses tended towards garish rather than drab. Oh, and those white marble statues that we like to look at in museums? Originally they were painted over. It blew my mind when I realized. Alexander Hamilton came to America in the 1700s after a giant natural disaster struck his home, the Caribbean island of Nevis. His government sent him to America after reading a letter he wrote describing the natural disaster. It was so beautifully written that they gave him the funds and everything to go to college and get smarter, so that he can return home with his newfound smartypantsness and help figure out how to give his island a makeover to look more alive. But he died before returning. Lin-Manuel Miranda presented the Hamilton Show to the island now 300 years later and donated all the proceeds to helping the island and its art entertainment district. So in a way, it's a roundabout story that started in 1700s and ended in 2000s. In 238 AD, the Roman Empire had a temporary emperor for 3 months that went by the name Marcus Clodius Pupienus Maximus. Yes, you read those last 2 words correctly. Pupienus Maximus. And yes, puppiness is exactly as naughty sounding as you hope it is. There was that one time the Austrian army attacked itself and lost 10,000 people. In France, the mistress of a king, Henri II, wanted to be young forever, and so she drinked gold in order to do it in well. She, of course, died at 66 years old poisoned by it. Learned that once, and I thought it's not every day you hear something like that. Teddy Roosevelt got shot with a bullet while he was about to give a speech, then coughed to see how much blood came out, and when he saw it wasn't that much he gave the speech, finished it and then went to the hospital. It was a 45-minute speech. Edit. Grammar error. Gilgamesh is the oldest story we have, but I personally only ever learned about the dude in university. He was depicted as godlike with really cool adventures with various mystical things. Yet unlike many such figures, historians do believe he existed. While Emperor Caesar was captured by pirates and placed for ransom, he befriended them, played games with them, shared poetry with them, all the while touting about how as soon as he's free he'll have them all publicly crucified. Once ransomed, he immediately kept his promise. Dude was a badass. Popsicles were accidentally invented in 1905 by an 11-year-old boy named Frank Epperson. A new theory suggests that Alexander the Great was probably buried alive. The theory states that he was suffering from paralysis, and since doctors in those times used breathing as a method to determine if a person is alive, instead of the pulse, his men probably buried him alive. The term, blue bloods, came from European monarchs in the Middle Ages. They avoided the sun so religiously that the veins in their face and neck literally looked blue due to their almost transparent skin. Theodore Roosevelt learned jiu-jitsu after going blind in one eye after a boxing match. Purple is considered a royal color because it used to be the most expensive and difficult dye to source. It came from sea snails or something like that. Anyway, only the rich could afford it, so only the rich wore it. Aztec human sacrifice victims were honored. They were frequently dressed to resemble gods or warriors and would stop to talk to people on their way to being sacrificed, dance and sing, and bless children. By all accounts, human sacrifice was seen as an honorable way to die, and many prisoners of war eagerly accepted this. Al Capone is the reason milk has expiration dates. We know how Hitler was failed in art school, but what we don't know is that when he was failed he was criticized for his uncreativity and called a potato. Anyway, there were 14 scholars in that meeting and he was the third person to be called that. Edit. Read the op username please. When the ruler of Constantinople heard that the Ottoman Empire was sending their army to take over the city, he started getting ready the defenses of the city. But he refused to buy a massive cannon because it was too expensive. The person who was selling the cannon then went and sold it to the Ottoman army, and they used that cannon to break down the invincible walls of Constantinople. The city would have probably survived if the ruler had bought the cannon first. Michelangelo, the dude who painted the ceiling of Sistine Chapel, had an argument with one of the priests that he is drawing nudity in those paintings. The main priest didn't care about it. Michelangelo decided to troll him by drawing his face depicting in hell with a snake biting his dick. Mansa Musa was a king of Mali who underwent a Hajj to Mecca, bringing with him so much gold that while passing through Egypt he crashed the local economy. Victorian England 1837–1901, American Old West 1803–1912, Meiji Restoration 1868–1912. So gentlemen thieves, rootin' tootin' cowboys, and honorable samurai all existed at the same time. Cleopatra lived closer to the invention of the cell phone than to the building of the Great Pyramids. Jesus' foreskin, Sanctum Preputium, was actually a Christian relic like the Turin grave cloth. Emperor Tiberius was such a fucking psychopath he had a fisherman's face scrubbed off with the same fish he had tried gifting the emperor. During World War II, Great Britain used inflatable tanks and planes to make their resources look more plentiful. There are even videos of troops running practice drills where they get under the inflatable and carry it around a giant field so they would appear as fully operational machinery. Christianity was successfully introduced to India before Scandinavia or Russia. People like to harp on Elizabeth Taylor playing Cleopatra because she was white, but it was actually relatively historically accurate because Cleopatra was of Greek descent and not African. In the 16th century, Czech peasants led the only successful peasant uprising and defeated the combined armies of the Pope and the Holy Roman Emperor 3 times. With a blind general organizing them. Using wheelbarrows and big sticks. They were allowed to worship how they wanted after the big boys gave up. There were no humans on Madagascar until 500 AD and they came from Borneo, not Africa. In the ancient Olympics, athletes competed naked. Also, the loudest sound ever known to exist was the eruption of the Krakatoa volcano, which many experts believe was loud enough to be heard around the globe several times. What I mean by that is the sound wave from the eruption circled the Earth, then did it again because it was so loud. One of the biggest heists in Japan's history was committed by a single man. He sent a letter to the manager of the bank, saying he will blow up his house if he doesn't give him money. The bank manager set a marked car to hand him the money, and the drivers were stopped by a police officer saying the house just blew up, and that he needs to check the car to see if it had a bomb on it. One of the passengers noticed smoke coming from the car and ran for cover, as well as everybody else. When they looked to see why the car didn't explode yet, it was gone. Everything they found at the scene of the crime was a popped flare. The only lead the cops had was the description of the false police officer, so the culprit was never found. Aine-my-opinion Koivunen was a Finnish soldier in World War II. He was carrying amphetamines for his group when they were ambushed by Soviet troops. Koivunen got tired, which led to him taking all 30 amphetamine pills he had, then passed out and got separated from his group. After waking up, he skied over 250 miles, escaped from Soviet troops again, got hurt after setting off a land mine, and lived off pine nuts and a bird that he caught and ate raw. When he was found a week later, he weighed less than 100 pounds and his heartbeat was around 200 BPM. I love telling this story because it's just fucking insane and almost no one knows about it. There were still living woolly mammoths on Wrangel Island when the pyramids were being built. The word, gypsy, comes from Egyptian. During the English Civil War, the Cavalier Army led by Prince Rupert, Charles I's nephew, had set up camp and was ready for battle for the incoming Roundheads, but they never showed. As the sun started to set and light was dimming, the Cavalier Army packed up and began partying that night instead. Reason being, in those ye old times, with no electricity, armies relied on the sun to see in battle, so battles weren't done at night. The Cavalier Army thought there was now no chance the Roundheads would attack as the sun was set. Well, surprise, the Roundheads took advantage of the drunken Cavalier Army and used the cover of darkness to launch a surprise attack on the unprepared partiers. It was Rupert's most humiliating defeat and marked the downturn for the Cavaliers in the war. Canada's landmass technically includes a tiny piece of France. For their work in Vimy Ridge, a notable victory for Canada in World War I, the French government declared a square kilometre of the place, the eternal property of Canada. A monument to the soldiers exists there. Also, the Netherlands send Canada thousands of tulips every year as thanks for sheltering the royal family during WW2. Canada even fast-tracked a measure to declare a hospital maternity ward suite extraterritorial, because royals must be exclusively Dutch citizens to retain their right to the throne. The plastic bottle was invented after the moon landing. Donald Trump's grandfather, Friedrich Trump, got expelled from Germany by royal decree and told to never come back. Hitler has a deformed penis.